Ladies and gentlemen, I want first of all to express my thanks to the organizers for this event, which is an opportunity to underscore the very important partnership between the United Nations and humanitarian partners and the armed forces of Ukraine, as well as other law enforcement actors. It's important in coordinating safe, secure and timely humanitarian response, and especially important for the population residing in isolated and highly insecure settlements. The armed conflict in eastern Ukraine has taken a heavy toll on civilians. As of 30 September 2020, OHCHR has recorded at least 3,368 civilians killed and more than 7,000 injured on both sides of the contact line. Through 2020, we've seen gladly the lowest annual civilian casualty figures. The armed conflict in eastern Ukraine has taken a heavy toll on civilians. As of 30 September 2020, OHCHR has recorded at least 3,368 civilians killed and more than 7,000 injured on both sides of the contact line. However, during 2020, we've also seen the lowest civilian casualty figures, thanks in large part to the ceasefire arrangement that was established in July. The UN is committed to continue to strengthen its cooperation with authorities, development partners, and the civil society sector to mitigate the suffering of Ukrainian civilians by addressing the immediate as well as the long-term humanitarian needs. In this regard, I wish to refer to the President's appeal to pursue a human-centric approach and wish to stress that the protection of civilians is a key obligation of the government, the central element of which is to save lives. Therefore, I encourage the Ministry of Defense, General Staff and Forced Operation to build up their civilian casualty mitigation work to aim at zero civilian casualties. We have seen positive initiatives such as the development of the strategy for the protection of civilians in armed conflict until 2030. I welcome the submission of this strategy to the Cabinet of Ministers and want to thank the many stakeholders, especially the armed forces of Ukraine, for their support in the implementation of initiatives regarding the protection of civilians. I hope that after the adoption of this strategy, UN agencies will have the opportunity to contribute to this respective action plan. Mutual support, coordination, and proper communication are key to success in bringing together military, civilian, and humanitarian actors together for an effective humanitarian response. The recent standing of the civilian casualty mitigation team within the Ukrainian armed forces is yet another very significant achievement towards the enhancement of protection of civilians. It is important that this commission operates with the requisite independence, resources, and funding. In addition, I call on all involved government structures to continue to exert the maximum efforts to increase the protection of those people living in the vicinity of the contact line and to provide them with assistance in accordance with international humanitarian law and international human rights law. We have seen visible improvements, but at the same time the situation remains fragile and complex, especially now during the COVID-19 pandemic crisis. As humanitarian coordinator, I shall continue to advocate for safe and sustained access for principled humanitarian operations, as well as facilitation of regular effective coordination, including with civilian military actors at the national and subnational level. Finally, I would like to stress the paramount importance of the provision of remedy and reparation for civilians for the loss of life, health, and property. Here I want to note in this regard the progressive development of two relevant laws in the Parliament, which the United Nations is closely monitoring. I would like to encourage government agencies to positively contribute to these very timely efforts. Let me conclude by saying that while the number of civilian casualties has thankfully been reduced during the course of this year, it remains very important to continue the dissemination of basic IHL principles within the armed forces and other law enforcement actors. It is also important to integrate IHL provisions, including customary IHL, to the statutes of armed forces and establish the mechanism for investigation of the alleged violation. I thank again the organizers for organizing this very important event and wish you very fruitful discussion. Thank you for your attention.